Happy Thursday, guys. Let's go ahead and just jump straight into things. Just like always, if you do if you're not going to type the answers directly into the Google document, make sure you have just a piece of paper. That way you can write things down. And then you can transfer it over later, and that way you'll have an answer for every single question. Okay. For today's do now, let's go ahead and take a look. Actually, sorry, I'm jumping ahead real fast. Our objective today is we will be able to identify whole numbers and integers. Okay. So we've already talked a little bit about this year. This is more of a review and kind of diving a little more into it. For today's do now, I want you to tell me if you could have one crazy pizza topping, what would you want to try? For example, would you want hot Cheetos on your pizza? Would you want Takis on your pizza? Would you want pineapple on your pizza? What is one crazy topping that you would want to try on a pizza someday? Or if you've tried something, what is it that you tried that you thought was really, really good? Okay, I'll give about 10 seconds to go ahead and write that. During this time, I'm going to go ahead and just get rid of this video. That way it helps you guys focus more on what's happening here. So take another couple of seconds here to go ahead and write down your one crazy pizza topping. Now, let's go ahead and just jump straight in. On the next page here, we're going to start talking about whole numbers, okay? First thing that we need to talk about is just what is a whole number? A whole number is any number that is not made of fractions or negative numbers. The whole numbers are numbers that are not made, and I'm going to change that is to an R real fast, that are not made of fractions or negative numbers. We'll talk about that in a second. Go ahead and just write that down first, though. So if we look specifically on a number line here we have a number line. I went ahead and copied it over here, just at least to start with. We've already talked about what a whole number really is, or also what a fraction is. We know a fraction is a number that's less than a whole, right? So for example, we could write fractions like 1/2 would be right here, right? 1/2. That's there because it's less than a whole, right? If this is our whole, I'm just going to put a box around that for now. Now that means like 3/4 could be here, 1/3 or 1/4 could be there, things like that. So these are all fractions and they're less than a whole, or they're between two wholes, right? So we could have like 1.5 here, right? So these are not whole numbers, right? Because they're between the whole numbers. The same thing goes for a negative number. A negative number, we already know, is any number that's less than 0. So over here, we'd start having our -1, -2, and it keeps going, right? But we specifically are talking about, again, a whole number is any number that is just, again, it's a whole number. It's not a fraction. It's not a negative number. And also, just to make this very, very clear, it's not a decimal. We know decimals are another way of showing a fraction, right? They're the exact same thing, whether it's 0.5, whether it's 0.45, whatever it is, that is still between or less than the whole number, all right? So again, it cannot be a fraction or a decimal, okay? Really, really, really important. Even if it's a decimal that is way over here, for example, if it was 3.5, that's still between two whole numbers, so therefore it's not a whole number, okay? Again, only looking at the whole numbers. So a whole number is any number that is not a fraction or a negative number, and of course, not a decimal as well. For example, if we look here, which of the following are whole numbers? We have 4, we have 2/3, we have 8, we have 12, and -5. If we just look at our number line alone, right? If we look at 4 and then 2/3, 4 right here is right there, right? Nice and easy to see. That is definitely a whole number. 2/3, that's going to be between 0 and 1. So if 2/3 is here, that means it is not a whole number, so we cannot count it as a whole number. So we're going to definitely put 4 so far. We'll put a comma there. 2/3 does not count. We already talked about that. 8 wholes, yeah, we're going to see that on the whole number, on our number line as a whole number. Same thing with the number 12. And remember, negative numbers are not whole numbers because they go onto this side of our number line, okay? Just so you guys do know, 0, the number 0 right here, is a whole number. We can talk more about exactly why that is later, but 0 is a whole number. So please keep that in mind, okay? So if you see 0 on something, yes, we're going to count that as a, oops, whoa, crazy, as a whole number as well. We're just going to zoom back out. All right, perfect. Now let's go ahead and just move on to our next one. Here we have integers, and integers are, sorry, let me move over here. So integers are any number that are, and I'm gonna put this in big capital letters, are not a fraction or a decimal. Go ahead and take a second to write that down. So any number that is not a fraction or a decimal is an integer. So that means that all these positive numbers, the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, we know that's a whole number. It's also an integer. Those are also integers. They're both. The number 0 is also an integer, but so are -1, -2, -3, -4, -5, and it keeps going. So any negative numbers that would pop up here on a number line, even if our number line kept going, would be an integer. So we're not talking about, though, fractions or decimals, okay? So fractions and decimals are not integers. So let's just take a look here. So we see the number 4 here. Number 4, I definitely see it. Let's go ahead and say that is an integer. It's also a whole number, but it is also an integer. 2/3 is not an integer, right? We're still not talking the little things between the numbers. We're not talking about that. So we're not going to write it. We have an 8 and 12. Again, those would show up on there. And -5. Again, -5 is one of our numbers, our primary numbers here that we would see. We do not have any fractions or decimals between, so that -5 still counts, okay? So go ahead and write those down. Again, -5 would be an integer. Now, for the rest of the lesson, all we're going to do is just ask identify what are some whole numbers, what are integers, and just see different types, okay? The first thing I do want to talk about real fast, though, is just the negative sign. How do you put this negative sign before a number? For example, if I write negative, I'm just going to come up with something random there, -9. Make sure you are putting a minus sign. If you look at the top of the keyboard, that's right next to the 0. So if you're looking at the top of the numbers, you have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Then there's a 9, there's a 0, and then there's a negative number. You can just put that negative number between that, okay? So that's what you would be doing here. So let's go ahead and take a look which are whole numbers. Just as a quick reminder, whole numbers are any numbers that are not made of fractions or negative numbers. So we're not looking for fractions, or we're not looking for negative numbers, and that also means decimals as well. So 0, is that a whole number? Yes, that is a whole number. -3, is that a whole number? No, it's less than 0, so we would not write that down. Let's go to the next one. What about 11? Are we going to see that on a number line? Yes, we will see that on a number line. What about 0.1 or 1/10, right? We know decimals and fractions are the same thing. That is not a whole number. And same thing with 4/5. That is not a whole number. That's between two wholes, all right? Same thing here. You're going to go ahead and work ahead on your own for integers. Whole numbers, again, it kind of just rotates back and forth. The only difference is that down here for question 4, it is asking you what type of number is -4. So you need to identify, is it a whole number, an integer, or none of the above? All right, again, a whole number, integer, or none of the above. There is an exit ticket on the next page, so make sure you do take care of that as well, making sure you're not writing inside of this box, but you're filling out that Google form. If you guys have any questions, you know how to get a hold of me. I know this is a relatively quick lesson, but we've already talked about a lot of the basics of this year. You know how to call me, you know how to text me, you know how to leave a voicemail or a voice message. So make sure you reach out if you need anything. Otherwise, I hope you guys have a great rest of your day, and I will see you tomorrow.